Going.
We are going. We are like.
Hi, hello. So welcome CD, welcome Joy to this wonderfully organized webinar called "Tell Me About It." And this is a really special sort of webinar episode because there have been so many people asking me so many questions. My phone is just full of these questions, which I'm going to refer to over a period of time. I just wanted to just kind of talk through you guys and your wonderful profiles before I get into talking about the subject at hand. And then what I'm going to do is just ask questions and let it be a freewheeling discussion as much as possible. So just hang on to your hat. Going live right now with CD and Joy. Well, CD or CD Mitra is a very popular professor across various institutes. So I'm going to start with him first. He is, the perennial young guy who's actually playing football at Micah Field if he can have a chance to do so amidst lectures. I don't know if you do it right anymore, CD, but I've seen you on the football field as much as.
Yeah, they don't give me as much chance these days. Yeah, that's my big crib.
Yeah, that's right. But CD, you've just to introduce you is a wonderful thing because I've always met you at a very interesting transitional part of my life. So whenever my life is going through a transition, I land up with CD, and we both have this wonderful heart-to-heart conversation, and then we go our ways. But CD has been an inspiration. He has been a consultant, coach, mentor. Not just to me, but to so many other people. And he's just been a very inspiring force for many people going through entrepreneurship and also just branding and marketing and advertising. So he's that old age guru who's become new age and become all with it. He's also, besides teaching a lot of other subjects in Micah, he also teaches sports marketing, and this is where his strength in sports marketing. I believe, how many years have you conducted sports marketing, CD?
11, I think. Yeah, it started with an accident, but yeah, 11 years.
It started with an accident. Well, we have to ask you that question at the end of the show, but all right, wonderful. So 11 years of sports marketing. So probably no one better than you to be on the show to give us professorial gyan. And on that note, I'll introduce Joy. And Joy, when people started hearing your name on the show, my God, the number of questions suddenly doubled and tripled. I just had to shut down my LinkedIn for a bit. The fact is that you've done some really crazy things. I mean, you were kind enough to tell me a few things before, but come on, we all know what you've been up to. You've not just the glamorous KKR, but just the fact that you're the CEO of this volleyball league that you're trying to build is just an amazing thing. Also, FIFA Under-17, right? So that's another brilliant role. You have also done your stints in ESPN and have been a thorough sports marketing and sports management professional, I would say. So welcome both of you to this show, and I just wanted to talk about the theme of the show. So what I wanted to do was probably talk about, I guess COVID-19 is upon us, and it's a shitty thing. It is there. Joy and I were just talking about it, saying that he was saying like, look, it's here. Whether it's good or bad, it's pointless to talk about whether it's good or bad. It's here, and we better deal with it, right? So I guess this whole webinar is about actually trying to figure out what the future of sports is, because, and trust me, I am not somebody who's going to quote Mike Tyson because he's a sports person, but he comes up with some really interesting quotes, and one of his quotes was, "Everyone has a plan till they're punched in the face." I guess that's what probably has happened to all of us who are in the world of sport. So I'd like to just kickstart this discussion by asking both of you for your view on whether how do you think the world with sports is going to be when there are no fans in the stadium. What do you guys think? Do you think that this will last? Do you think that it will ease? Do you think it will, just thoughts open. Joy, you can go first. I'm sure.
Yeah. Interesting. I think two parts to it. One is that it depends, from game to game, definitely, because there are some games which naturally lend themselves to being in empty stadiums. That's okay. I mean, if you play squash and you play squash in an empty stadium, it's not going to be so bad. There are some games where players, especially team games, where players literally feed off the energy of the players around them. The fact of the matter is, it's never easy to play in an empty stadium. It's very, very difficult. And I remember there was this situation, I think it was in 2009 or 10, I think it was 2010, where India was playing the World Cup T20 tournament. And we are used to always having full crowds in India. And because it was, they wanted to tailor it to India time, they actually had the matches kicking off at 9 in the morning in the West Indies. 9 in the morning, the West Indies is like completely, and the stadiums were totally empty. And that was the last time I remember watching India play in an empty stadium. And I remember how difficult it was. And it's not easy at all. So the fact of it is that it is a new reality. But see, many more things will emerge. One is that, is it going to be completely empty? Are you going to be able to sell some seats? Is the fact that suddenly the sort of value of being in a stadium, you will still have some people, but there'll be a extremely exclusive bunch of people. Because they will have the ability at this thing to practice distancing and sit around. So there could be lots of things that are happening out here which we are not completely aware of how it's going to play out. But the transition from playing with zero crowds, from crowds to zero crowds, is a very difficult transition. At the end of the day, the only question that you have to ask yourself is, it's still an easier transition from the transition to playing to not playing, right? So choose what you have to, and I think you've got to make the best of a bad situation.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thanks for your opening remarks and opening shots there. CD, what do you think?
Yeah. So I think everything we're going to discuss, we have to look at the short, medium, and the long haul kind of implications. So in the short haul, I think it's a bummer. Everything about sports, how players are used to playing and how audiences are used to watching the whole experience, not having lots of people inside a stadium, the whole what Joy talked about, feeding off the energy, fans, players from the fans from the players, fans from each other, all of that has been completely hardwired into our current understanding and behavior around how we enjoy sports. That not being there is going to be, in the short run, I think it's going to be a big bummer. It's really going to be such a disruption that you may have some people falling off, some people not enjoying, some people not being able to play to their fullest, and all of that. So there will be definitely a temporary disruption. How bad it is, and depending, Joy rightly said, depending on what kind of sport it is, there will be different levels. But in the medium term, I think just as much sports have kind of reinvented themselves. For example, right now we look at stadiums where you have 50,000, 60,000 people, sitting together. Maybe we need to redesign stadiums, which will allow for social distancing, which will allow for partitions between seats, which I don't know. I mean, it will mean maybe in some ways reinventing the whole way. And in the long run, of course, there are a whole lot of other stuff which is beginning to happen. And I think maybe towards the end of the session, we'll get into things like, esports, fantasy gaming, whatever. Will new forms of sports emerge? Will some of the existing sports which thrive on live stadium audience not do so well, and new forms of sport which are much more digital oriented thrive in the future? I don't know. I mean, it's open to speculation, but all the sports that we enjoy today, all of them are a few hundred years old, and maybe this is a big disruption in the world of sports. I mean, we'd hate to think of it, but maybe I'll sound towards the end, I'll sound philosophical. I think sports is about resilience and agility, and I think the whole world of sports is going to face that challenge now.
Yeah. No, that's interesting. Resilience and agility. Those are two key terms, actually. One of the things that I wanted to talk about with both of you, right? I was in Italy just a few months back, and I saw the Colosseum. And at that point in time, the Colosseum was the place where sports of that era were played. And again, there was a stadium. right? And from that time, or maybe even before that to now, stadia have been absolutely key for the performance of the sport, and there must be a reason for it. So even if you're trying to redesign a stadium for social distancing and all of that, I think those two terms seem to be kind of in opposition to each other. Don't you feel? Joy, any thoughts on?
Yeah, look, it's difficult, but as I said, again, it's a matter of saying that what do you really need to do to adjust, and there are many interesting situations. Like one of the things that not many people are aware of are that in 2022, Qatar is supposed to do the Football World Cup. So one of the people bidding for that World Cup was Japan. Okay,
Yeah.
And Japan had put together a presentation, and I remember parts of it because at that time I was associated with FIFA.
Yeah.
And they had this amazing concept where they said that for each team that qualifies for the World Cup, they will have a virtual stadium in that country where they can actually populate. Fans would sit and have a complete virtual experience like that happening in front of them, where the game is actually being held elsewhere, but it's a completely virtual experience. Now, that is something which is possible in today's technology. In today's technology, it's already possible.
Yeah.
The question is, that solves a problem for the fan.
Yes.
It doesn't solve the problem for the player.
It doesn't.
The problem, it solves the problem for the fan. And there are many now fan experiences which are like sitting in a stadium. There are many softwares now which allow you to sit and discuss with your friend while you're watching a match together, literally having a watch party, many things like that. But those are solving a problem for the consumer. They still are not completely solving the problem for the guy out there in the field. And that is a more difficult transition. Don't forget, however, the one thing that it's good not to forget is the fact that every guy has started playing with no crowds watching. When you start the game, you started playing with no crowds watching, and that's where you've honed your game. That's where you've gone up. You've practiced with no people watching. So, playing or performing in a situation where nobody really cares. So, my point is that will it be an easy transition? No. Is it a transition that players will manage? I'm sure they will.
I think just to put that into context, that's a brilliant point. If you look at the sporting phenomenon or the sporting event, it is a theater type experience as well as a movie type experience at the same time. I think that is quite unique about sport, isn't it? And I just wanted to get CD on with his point, which he was mentioning to me at, I think, one of those walks in Mike about mirror neurons, right? And I just wanted to talk to you about mirror neurons and your view on them and what a fan actually is to the whole world of sport. And where do you think this will change or whether this will remain the same?
Yeah, so this pushes me back 2 steps, almost goes back to this whole philosophical question of, why do we need sports? One of the funny things that has happened right now is that, it's a given that quote unquote sports is not an essential service. That's why sports is on complete lockdown, right? We are getting our bread and milk, but we are not getting our live sports because there's some kind of a basic, if you think of Maslow's hierarchy or whatever, it's not something that you need to survive. However, then the next question that arises is that, so why do we really need sports? Why has human society created or invented sports? And there can be lots of theories, and that probably itself is a separate vast topic, and we'll probably not even end up agreeing because there are many dimensions to it. But one of the amazing things about sports is the fact that it is about it's about the basic human fascination of wanting to know the unknown, right? Because the best thing about sports is the thrill and drama of not knowing. You have hope, you have anticipation, you want your favorite team and player to win, but the truth is you don't know. And that is what keeps you going. That is what keeps you glued into the whole action, right? And this thing about mirror neuron that you mentioned is that, the fan actually almost becomes one with the player. It's often been proven and scientifically proven that, when there is a striker about to take a penalty kick, his heartbeat, his heart's pumping, right? His adrenaline and dopamine are at a real high. Yeah. So is the goalkeeper. The funny thing is, if you check the brain waves of the fans in the stadium, or even the ones watching on television, their brainwave activity is almost 80 to 90% identical to what is going on in the brain of the player, which means at that point of time, you're feeling the same emotions, the same kind of neuronal activities happening in your brain. You are as much emotionally invested in whether it becomes a goal or not, whether the player catches the ball or not. All of that is going on in your brain.
So there is a scientific background to the energy that we keep talking about very loosely. There is a science behind it. Actually, what I wanted to ask Joy, so that we can get his perspective on this, is do you feel that you talked of a player kind of starting to play without any crowd and then going to play in front of a crowd and getting better. That's great. That works, right? Do you think it can work the other way around? Do you think that when a player because a player eventually wants to be recognized, and so Wimbledon center court is where he wants to be or she wants to be, and so on and so forth. So do you think that it's a bit of a letdown? Because we know, like, for example, Ranji Trophy games, right? As compared to, say...
No, true. I agree with you in the sense that, players thrive on energy, players thrive on adulation. But remember, one of the things is that they also do that as long as they know somebody is watching. It's a question of, it's a very simple, to give you an analogy, yesterday, 20 years back, you would be the smart guy in the college canteen and make a wisecrack and 5 people would laugh at your joke, you'd find it funny. It was cool. That's how you got your trip. Today, you might get that same trip putting a post on Facebook, on Twitter, and getting a reaction out of it. So now you've already managed to, whether you like it or not, transfer your being the college jester in the canteen to being the college jester online. Okay, so it processes like this, and it's been done in such a seamless and natural way that you don't even realize it. Correct. That you're getting that same kick and affirmation online as you would when you were sitting with your friends and they'd say, "Yaar, kya joke mara yaar." So the truth of it is that we are infinitely adaptable creatures. We're infinitely adaptable creatures as long as players start understanding that, okay, people are watching me, 1 million people are watching me. They may not be watching in this stadium, but they're watching me. They will get used to it at some point in time. It's not that difficult. And yes, some games will be easier to adjust than other games, but they will adjust. I promise you they will, because every player has that. He understands that. And I know players, after every game, whether you like it or you don't like it, every guy is sitting, especially if he's done well or this thing, he's on, going to his Facebook and his Instagram page, checking up what people are writing about what he's saying. So already he's looking for online affirmation. It's not something that he's not looking for already. So I don't see that as that much of an issue.
I'm going to allow me to step in. I'm going to build on this. Something, it just occurred to my head, and I'm just visualizing and imagining. Players are used to live audiences around and the energy and the shouting and whatever. Imagine a stadium is actually, all around the playing field, there's a video wall. And each of the tiles of the wall is based on what the fans are seeing, or their own pictures on your mobile, and you're shouting and you're screaming, and that's being played back into the stadium, right? You will get all the sound of 50,000, maybe 5 million people into the stadium shouting. You can have bionic devices where the heartbeat of the fans will reflect in the colors that are around the stadium. So in some ways, maybe it will take a little while for players to get used to it, but you will understand that what is happening even in a real time. I mean, Joy gave a great example, but there's at least slight delay. Here in real time, you actually know what's the almost a biological and emotional reaction happening to people around the world, which is actually being shown on video walls around the player. And that's probably going to feed back the energy. It sounds like sci-fi, but what the hell? It's possible, no?
Idea. I think it's actually quite doable, because if you look at what Microsoft is doing with its Azure technology and connecting it to the basketball league, I believe that they are actually in a place wherein you can have virtual reality being played out for each fan. Now, the only question I have is the vision that you've given is I could almost visualize a sledger's corner in one side, and I could actually visualize one team's fans on one side and the other team's fans on the other side, all visual, right? And virtual, kind of virtual. Now, if you look at the way in which, say, the music industry is shaped, right? Music industry has actually moved away from, let's say, we had cassettes, and then we had discs, and we had whatever, to concerts, right? So I'm not here to talk about the music industry, but over here the entire business model, okay, has kind of shifted from the in-stadia arena to let's say the digital as well as the media ecosystem around the thing, right, Joy? But now we are beginning to understand the live event, I think. And any thoughts on that?
See, the point is exactly that. The live event is only for the players. The fact of the matter is, so if you, to give you a very typical example, in an IPL match, okay, the average earnings that a team makes for a match, okay, on tickets, gate receipt, is actually about 1.5 to 2 crores, 2.5 crores if you're really doing well. Mind you, already a team like Delhi does more than that just on its corporate boxes. Okay?
Right.
Because corporate boxes are hugely popular.
Correct.
But take that gate receipt as divide that by the, say, 5,000, 2,500 odd crores that, say, is played for an average season. By the 58 odd matches, and you will find out that the online sort of, in every way, television, streaming, is about 1,000 times as lucrative as the people on the ground. That's a ratio. Okay, for a big event like, see, the IPL, it would lie in the early hundreds at least. I think it's over 1,000. So that's my point, that at the end of the day, it's getting used to it, because you have to get used to it. The money is already being made outside.
Correct. Completely understand what you're saying. CD, just one related question. Do you think any brands have done well in this period of COVID-19 with their response as to what's happening, or are they all just keeping quiet? Has any brand stood out? Do you wish that they'd done something different? Any crazy ideas like the one which you shared before?
Honestly, no, or not enough. But I know there are a lot of people who are working kind of on the pipeline. So there are I think 2 or 3 kind of things which are happening. One is, of course, brands who are basically figuring out that thanks to lockdown and stuff like that, how do you disintermediate? How do you have a direct to consumer model where you can deliver what they want, get them into a subscription model, and get them into all kinds of stuff, right?
Correct.
2 is wherever there is a service or a product or whatever that can be delivered digitally, right? Then obviously that's the big opportunity. And I think a lot of us are now figuring out. I mean, after this, a lot of us are going to start questioning ourselves. Do we need to have so many business travels, so many business conferences, so many business meetings, right? So obviously a lot of, behavior is shifting to the digital model, and every digital delivery where even if you get, 70-80% of the efficiency. I mean, right now we're having a webinar. I mean, this would have been great if we were sitting in a class, but we're doing okay. And the technology is going to catch up. There may be some disruptions, but I'm sure the technology is going to catch up, right? So sooner or later, and it's also a matter of getting used to it. And then the whole, the fear versus the convenience versus the cost and all of that. And the other thing you must remember is that, there are some relatively old people like us who are used to one way of doing things. For us, the habit change is going to be more difficult. Imagine an 8 or a 10-year-old kid who's, just about getting into school, and this COVID happens. He or she might grow up in a virtual environment where this is the new normal, and they will get used to it. They will probably think this is how it is. The other thing, of course, that's happening, the last point that I want to make is there are brands who are actually stepping out and trying to, either pivot their own business, where we're saying that how can I be to a larger service to humanity? And sometimes they're going out of their comfort zone to saying, can we help people? So I know, for example, since we're talking sports, there are football clubs in Italy who have actually gone and delivered food and medicines to their, old fans. I mean, that's a wonderful way of building bridges and building, a sense of community and building loyalty with your target audiences. So these are ways that, you in the short run, maybe you're not going to be able to make money, but you might have ways of strengthening relationships, which you can then later monetize. So I can see some of those attempts already happening.
Wonderful. Thanks a lot. Related question to Joy. Joy, do you think, suppose you were involved with KKR right now, okay? What would you do?
I would definitely find some way to get related to the Kolkata fan. I'd find some way to talk to them. I'd find some way to be involved in the attempts. I have so many ambassadors who can speak to the people of Kolkata. I have so many people I can offer prizes. There's merchandise. There's this thing. I would do an online auction, put away some Kolkata merchandise, give it away, give that money to charity. This is the time when you want to be a part of your community. There is no better time to be a part of your community than when the community is in trouble. So and anyone who does not recognize that is this thing. I would definitely, this is the time to give back. And every sports team should recognize that. A lot of them have. I just wish all of them would be just as active.
I think that what I'm hearing from both of you is that if this is the time for sports to go a little beyond itself and connect with the community for a greater good is what I'm getting from you. And whether it's through players or whether it's through franchisees or anything of that sort, right?
Yeah. I'm going to build on that. I completely agree with what Joy said. One is the players, the coaches can come out virtually and be inspiration, be motivators, give out messages. They can use some of the resources to, distribute, whatever, food, medicines, etc. to their old fans, to their less well-to-do fans and stuff like that. The other thing is that you can actually channelize the energy and the goodwill. You can let fans come out and help each other. You can collect money from fans. You can tell them, imagine you're in Kolkata and you can saying that we've identified, there are 1,000 East Bengal fans who need help in ABC, and there'll be 10,000 other East Bengal fans who will want to come and help them. And East Bengal becomes the channel, the conduit through which one group of people who are connected with the other group of people, simply because they are bound together, because they are the same fans of the same club, help each other.
I understand. Now, I just wanted to compare and contrast. One guy, Ishan Kakkar, shout out to Ishan, he's asked a question. What do you guys, now you're at a particular place, point of view. What are your views on, say, the WWE conducting empty arena shows, including WrestleMania, and registering above than expected profits? And, what do you feel about that?
Okay,
the essential commodity or something, right?
Okay, first and foremost, let me just put this out there, and I'm going to lose a lot of friends out there in Micah and in the virtual world, but what the hell? WWE is male soap opera. Okay, it's Saas Bhi Kabhi Bahu Thi without the for men. The reason is it is scripted. Yes. Anything that is scripted is not technically sport.
Right.
Okay? So you might as well have been shooting a film. You might as well. They are very. Don't get me wrong. I think it's very well done. It's very well scripted. People are really athletic. They're really good.
Right.
But they are. You've heard it from me, and I'll say it again. Actors. Okay.
Right.
You might as well have been shooting a film. So, hell, fantastic. Bully for them.
It's not sports.
It's not sports.
Good, thank you. Okay, so here's another one. This is really interesting. According to Nielsen's study about Generation Z and its behavior towards sports, Z is more loyal to athletes than they are to clubs or franchises or teams. How do you think it will affect sports franchises, especially going forward? Because we've had a bit of a break, and people connect a lot to their the players that they admire and stuff like that, even in team sports. So what are your guys' take on something like this, especially in cricket?
Joy, you want to go first?
All yours. Okay. CD yours.
Yeah.
All yours.
It's often questioned, where does the journey of a fan begin? And it usually begins with iconic players, right? But sooner or later, where it ends up and where it resides is with the club or the team, right? So in the long run, your loyalty is more likely to stay with the club or the team, and the players will come and go, but the club is where you and along with other fans you hang out, right? Very rarely, occasionally it does happen. Someone like Ronaldo moves or whatever, some fans would move, but by and large, the fans, the iconic players help recruit fans, but then once you tied in with a club. So I think being member of a club is a lot to do with not just loving the sport or looking up and admiring the player. It's also a sense of community. It's a sense of, it's quasi patriotism, right? You almost feel loyal. You almost feel a kind of sense of patriotic duty to kind of support and do the best you can to keep supporting, which is why, even when your team loses, you don't give up, right? Because it gets instilled in you. It's like almost your duty bound. So that is where I think while there is a temporary break and some players will shift and some players won't be there, clubs have to get back to, in some senses, which is where we were talking. You have to keep on holding on to your existing fans in other ways, not just by doing sports, which is unfortunately not there. And you can still, remember the good old times and play back old matches, but you can also get players and coaches to, like you can have live webinars like this where players and coaches come and talk to their fans and stuff like that. So you're still connected. But of course, you have to double up in terms of recruiting old new fans and reconnecting with old fans once things start becoming a little more normal, right? Yeah. Whatever that normal is, that normal may be a new normal. Not the same one.
Related question. Sorry, CD, to cut you. Just a related question to Joy. I was always surprised when all these IPL leagues actually got in, and it's played out in football leagues as well. When you had non-local players coming in to clubs, and then suddenly making things popular, say MS Dhoni for Chennai Super Kings, etc. But do you think that will continue to benefit the club, or do you think that is actually going towards the star individual?
See, actually, in team sport, and which is why I say this very strongly, in team sport, finally, everything that a player does accrues with the club, and even larger accrues with the league and the sport. Yeah. So it's very interesting. The NBA actually prides itself on the fact that the most followers are the players get the most followers, followed by the clubs, followed by the NBA. And they have no problem with it whatsoever because they believe that that's a natural process. You start with the club, you start with the player, you start with the hero, you sort of move to the club. And then the larger gain is that the sport or the league itself also grows as a whole because of it. So you first become a fan of LeBron James, then you become a fan of the Lakers, and then you become a fan of NBA and then basketball, the sport. So as long as they are clear about it, and remember, what are we talking about? Suppose, let's say sport is disrupted for a year. I have a feeling that whatever it is in some shape or form, the sport will return within, say, a year. In some shape or form. And I'm venturing, I'll go out on a limb and say that. Now, if I say that, any player can, players are injured, they're out for a year all the time. It happens, the player's gone, he's not playing a season. So it's not as if tomorrow LeBron James or these guys will just lose their popularity. It would help, as CD says, to keep them relevant, to keep meeting, maybe having Instagram, to have discussions, to keep them there. Again, the better leagues are doing a great job of this because they keep putting out stuff reminding you, wow, this is the team you follow. Take a look at these highlights. Take a look at these great moments. So they're telling you all the time, guys, we're still here. We're not going away. And it's important to do in these periods. But I think that, I think it's definitely going to recover. And that's how it's going to go.
Do you think that one of the ways in which these guys have been kind of keeping the flame alive is by recasting old matches and stuff like that? Do you think that works? How
I personally think they work. I see. You have to say how effective they are as opposed to what. How effective are they as opposed to not having lives? Are they as good as live sport? Of course they're not. But are they good stuff to put out when you don't have live sport? I still think player interviews and all are great, but reminding people about why they love the game or this particular team is the best way of keeping people involved with sport.
Right. So, okay. Again, back to the question on the clean break. Do you think, like we've been noticing esports, and let's talk of esports or e-gaming right now. Do you think that that's going to get a big fillip now because of this break? Do you think that it was always on the ascendancy for the past few years? I'd like your views on why esports is getting so popular in the first place, and maybe it could be a historical perspective or a different perspective that you may have. I'd love you to share that with, and your views on whether it's going to have a spike.
CD, all yours.
Yeah.
Okay. So I think there are two things. One is primarily, one of the things I talked of mirror neurons and all of that, and dopamine and adrenaline and all of that. One of the great things about sport, especially for a vast majority of people who don't have much to look forward to or hope or achieve in their own lives, is a sense of what is called vicarious achievement. Yeah. When your favorite team or player wins, and even if they don't, the sheer hope that every time they go out to play that they could win gives you hope. And this is, for example, the British football clubs, their traditional fan base used to be people used to work in mills, people used to work in mines. They had dead-end lives. They had nothing to look forward to. But guess what? Every Friday evening, every Saturday evening, they had something to look forward to. When if the team won, they said, we won, I won, right? So it gives you a sense of feeling of achievement and accomplishment. Yes. However much that closely, aligned you are and your mirror neurons are to the player, somewhere deep down, that it's another one's achievement that you are rubbing off, There is a term in sports marketing called BIRG, basking in reflected glory, right? You're basking in reflected glory of what the team has done. However, one of the great things about esports or fantasy sports is that it allows you to convert from a spectator to actually a player. Yeah. And you don't necessarily need as much of, I know it needs a lot of skills, but it doesn't need as much of the physical fitness and skills of a real player who's out there playing. And it could still be, doing pretty well. So it allows you to feel a little more like a player because you are actually participating more actively. So that's one positive. The other, of course, is the fact that we are now talking about, and I think at least I can speak for myself and maybe Joy, we are on the wrong side of the digital divide. We try our best to kind of catch up and all of that. But, a generation of young kids who are growing up, with their fingers on the button where, everything they do is through digital, devices. It's about living their life through digital devices. So even sport is a natural expression of, how much they do and how much they participate. So from both these perspectives, I see fantasy sports and esports becoming even bigger. I mean, some of us may or may not like it. That's our personal choice. But to me, it seems pretty obvious. And right now, given what has happened, thanks to COVID and thanks to some of the restrictions that will probably remain for some time, maybe quite some time, all the more reason why, fantasy sports and esports. We talked about how everything will shift to digital faster. So I think that's going to happen to sports too. That's my personal opinion.
Okay, I'd like to probably share a contrary view on this. I feel that the more we are disconnected perhaps from each other, it's quite possible that we are yearning for that physical contact and physical show. So that's another fact. I'm not denying the fact that e-gaming or esports is on the ascendancy, and obviously, it's going to have its own fans. But I'd like Joy's take on it. What do you feel? He was already cutting the question off.
No. I genuinely believe esports is going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. There's no doubt in my head about it. Yeah. Simply because of the basic fact of life, which is that you don't need to be, it's one of the sports in which you don't need to be that particularly fit. It's much easier for you to become a hero in an esport, and therefore the playing field in many ways is possibly much more leveled in that sense. So esport is going to be bigger and bigger, and as the technology catches up and your experiences become more and more realistic and more lifelike, the more it's going to grow. So let's not even pretend that esport is the thing. The only thing that I do have to say, and I do agree with you to that extent, definitely, that sport is going nowhere. Because I think what will happen is when it is difficult for people to come together for a sport, What will just happen is that the price or the viability of it, the thing will become, the value of it will increase.
Yeah.
So it's like saying that, today the value you said to saying that, okay, I can go and watch this game in a stadium.
Yeah.
After this, maybe going to watch a game in the stadium is a very special experience and a very much more coveted experience than it was before. I think that value is going to rise.
Yeah.
And it's not going to go away. I think both sports are going to grow. I have no doubt in my head esport will grow exponentially simply because of the level playing field it offers. But real sport, or not real sport, because esport is real sport. It's a competition.
It's not scripted.
But, physical. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Physical sport is going nowhere either.
Okay, so related question to you, Joy, and CD can chip in after this is: do you feel that India will get out of the single sport syndrome quicker because of COVID-19?
I've been facing this question for the past, God knows.
I'm sure.
Only difference, the only thing that has changed in this question in the past 20 years, because not 20, about 30 odd years that I've been hearing this question, is that we've grown from 1 billion people to 1.3 billion people. That's all that's happened. Nothing else has really changed. The fact of the matter is that, look, India is moving towards being a multi-sport country. Just that cricket is actually still growing. All the sports are growing at 30-40%. Cricket is growing at maybe 10-15%. But the base is so large that they are still so much bigger than everyone else. It's not that the other sports are not growing. And the other fact of the matter is that with all their problems, with all the politics, and there's a lot of it, cricket is still by far and away the best, most efficiently run sports federation in the country. At the end of the day, the biggest problem with India is the sports federations. A lot of them are either in the hands of people who are corrupt, and corruption is one part, or incompetent. And that's probably worse, because what happens is you may be good enough to sort of run a sport when it was, one friendly Santosh Trophy tournament, but are you good enough to, make this sports transition to a multi-million-dollar industry? Most cases they are not. They are scared. And that's really what's holding Indian sport back. So solve the federations and you have so much growth waiting for you. It's not funny.
Okay. CD, any thoughts?
Yeah, so I firstly completely agree with Joy that there's been too much of historic combination of incompetence and corruption, which has held Indian sport back. And in that, cricket has, apart from the fact that Indian cricketers did well from the time of Gavaskar and Kapil Dev and all of that. But I think I see, and I think you will know that too. Since we meet a lot of young people, I see a lot of hunger in young people. Two things. One is the whole international exposure, right? I see a lot more young people who are exposed to EPL, NBA, all of that, who generally want to get out of this cricket trap and saying, okay, it's not that cricket is bad, or I don't like cricket, or I don't play cricket, but what the hell, I also like tennis, or I like football, or I like whatever. And that's becoming, it's getting much more legitimate, and with more channels, more online availability of content and all that is simply growing. So I'm clearly seeing your young generation, which is much more open to the idea of more sports and having their own personal choices, which is not necessarily dictated by what people around them or older people are preferring. That's one. The second thing, of course, is that, I don't know, I'm hoping that this whole disruption that is happening, sometimes good outcomes come out of bad things. So I'm hoping that this whole entire COVID thing and the setback and coming back, maybe there will be new ways. I mean, one, of course, is the whole technology and esports, whatever. Maybe new other kind of sports will find a faster way to kind of get back to action and, find their feet. And sometimes the analogy I have is that, when the Titanic saw the iceberg coming, they were still maybe a mile and a half away, and they couldn't get out of the way. But if it was a gunboat, it would have probably been able to be more agile and quickly shift and avoided that collision. So I think maybe younger, smaller sports, more agile sports might actually find a better way of coming back and becoming more relevant. Who knows?
Just a related weird question I've got. I'm combining some of the questions that are coming through to my phone as well. Do you think that, both of you, right? I'll start with CD first. Do you think that there is a sport or a couple of sports that are going to peculiarly benefit from this disruption? Peculiarly, like for example, let me just like for example, silent sports. There are some sports that require silence. There are some sports which can be played indoors. So obviously, the infrastructure and requirements all are different for different sports. So any thoughts? Any wild thoughts that some sport will just take off like this?
Look, if I was to look at it, the one thing that definitely any sport which is non-contact at this point in time will seem to have preference over contact sports. Simple, basic thing, that contact versus non-contact. Okay, so that's one thing that's it. Secondly, players, the smaller an area that's required to do the sport, the better off you are. Larger stadia is going to be a larger issue because these are larger problems associated with it. Smaller area, indoor arenas, possibly they're easier to police, smaller situations. So all those could be factors that help, and there are many games that can this thing. So if you see how basketball started, why did basketball start? Basketball started because James Naismith said that in the YMCA, these guys play American football and baseball. What do they play in the winter? You can't go outside. It's too cold to play in the winter. So what happens? He goes and puts a peach basket up and says, okay, here's a game we can play in winter because we can play it indoors. That's why basketball started. It was invented. Why did volleyball start? Volleyball started because they said, hey, you know what? Basketball, you get a lot of injuries because it's a contact sport. At the end of the day, people are driving to the rim, people are blocking. Let me create a sport that can be played indoors, which is non-contact. So he created volleyball. And volleyball, essentially, therefore, the amount of injuries that you get in volleyball are much less than you would get, say, in a basketball or a football. So I'm saying all these, I'm not necessarily saying that basketball and volleyball are the sports that are going to benefit, but definitely with the change dynamics or as an invention or as a solution to a problem, different sports probably will emerge stronger. I'm not saying that the others are going to go away. Some sports are going to get an unexpected fillip. My sense is non-contact sports will be the ones who get a first big one.
So any choice?
Difficult to say. See, I'll tell you, who gets on. One of the things that you look at today is that whoever gets on gets permissions to be able to play and stage a tournament as early as possible. Because right now, you go and tell any Indian fan what he wants to do is switch on the television and see a live bug out there. That's what every person is dying for, just to see that live bug. So whoever manages to scramble and get on first is the guys who are going to benefit, because you just want to watch live sport.
Yeah.
Not to mention save the what do you call the salaries of thousands of sports journalists who are also sitting wondering what are we going to write about now.
Yeah, correct. That's true. CD, any thoughts on this?
Yeah, so I'm just building on what Joy said. So one is, every sport is kind of dying to get back into action, and the fans are, and sometimes it might even happen that, I may have my preference of number one, number two, number three sport. And if number one sport is not getting played and number two sport gets back into action, I'll start following it and maybe get a direction. So from that point of view, I don't know. I've read that, Formula One is trying to get back early in. That is not really too much of contact between whatever, right? That's one. Maybe smaller indoor stadiums, things like table tennis, even badminton, all of that, they may get a fillip at this point of time because of the peculiar constraints that the larger format sports are under. Maybe more, things that you can almost equally enjoy watching online and enjoying it. And as you said, silent sports, maybe things like chess might get a fillip, which is whatever. And the last thing, I'm kind of sticking my head out. Maybe this is a great opportunity for somebody to invent some new sport, keeping all these constraints in mind.
Yeah, that's interesting.
All sports that we enjoy today are sports that were invented at some point of time. Who's going to invent a new sport in 2020?
Perfect. That's a good one, CD. That's a brilliant idea, as usual. Very good. Joy, I have a question for you. If you have to package something like esports for TV, right? How would you do that?
It's tough. I wouldn't even try esport for TV. What I would try and do is not TV. I try and package it on for online. See, because see, one of the beauties of TV finally is, for me, TV is actually 50% of money, 20% of online. It's online without the sort of back and forth. So my point is that esport online, live streaming with comments coming, everything happening, that for me is very easy to do. It's not difficult at all, because you can show the players, you can have multiple screens, you can pick off player screens, you can see comments at the back. See, the truth of it is, let's not pretend that you want to make the same, you need to make the same look and feel of a live cricket match for a live esport match for it to work.
Correct.
You can work it completely differently. And remember, today, already in cricket, you're second screening, in the sense that you're watching the feed, you're talking with your friend, you're looking up stats. Hey, in esport, I could probably offer you all of that happening. The screen happening at one shot, the players out there who I can focus on, comments happening, one expert talking about it, two experts in two other languages talking about it. All that I can do together. So that's how I'd go and package it. I wouldn't even go TV. I'd say esport was born to be online. Let's keep it there.
Okay. Thanks, Joy. CD, a question for you. If your kid wants to go and play cricket, right, or play football or something, and as a concerned parent, right, what would you do? And now, just scale that question up a little. Do you foresee a problem at the grassroots level for people to get involved with sports?
Yeah, at the short run, yes. I know a lot of sports academies are probably facing this question. The summer holidays coming up, and this is a great time for sports academies to get filled up with the summer holidays and summer camps. And they're all going to struggle because parents are going to be firstly, it may not even be allowed. And even if there's like partial, lifting of lockout or whatever, a lot of parents are going to be seriously worried about letting their kids go out, right? So it's not only about, wearing masks and stuff like that. It might be about don't play this, play that. As Joy mentioned, maybe you'll allow your kid to go and play badminton or squash, but not football or cricket or whatever. The other thing, of course, is the fact that, maybe in the short run, it'll be more about training and not so much about playing to keep people's fitness alive. And, you kind of hit the ball and you make people run and practice, catching the ball. But when you actually have to physically play together, the full Monty game, I honestly, as a parent, would really worry whether my kid at this point of time should be allowed till I don't know. I mean, of course, anything could happen. There could be a vaccine out and we all could get vaccinated, and a year from now, everything could be back to hunky-dory. And the coronavirus may not be there, and maybe we'll all more or less come back. But at this point of time, it's very difficult. I mean, if I'm looking at, sports camps this summer, I think they're doomed, very honestly.
Yeah, especially swimming and stuff, right? Who the hell is going to go swimming? Absolutely a problematic case. And I just feel very bad for all those coaches and at that level, right? It's a very tough one. Well, here's another question. I know we are going to run out of time soon, but I've got a couple of interesting questions for you. One is, if experiencing sports, and probably this is for Joy, if experiencing sports for fans in stadiums would now be rarer than ever, what is the future of the media rights market and the pricing attached to it? Will it have any kind of connect, or not really? Or will it in fact get pricier? Or what will happen?
Not look immediately, as I said, I don't really see the media rights decreasing or increasing. What does happen, though, the one sad natural impact of it is a lot of sports, a lot of sporting leagues are teetering on the edge of, somehow just managing to put their make ends meet. Okay. Now what happens is sponsors have less money. There's less money in the market. Those are going to fall off the edge. That's the sad, bad fact of the matter. What happens in situations like this, and it shouldn't happen, but that's what happens. The rich will get richer, because what happens is people will just say, cricket is safe, IPL is safe, let me put my money there. And so the risk taking, once risk taking is reduced, the so-called likelier super hit films will get this thing. So a lot of smaller leagues will get seriously impacted, and they are going to seriously have to look at their business model and say that this in many ways would have pushed Indian sport back 5-6 years easily, because just in terms of just when there's a certain amount of consumer confidence in, okay, this is going to grow, this is going to happen, it's pushing you back. So yeah, while there will be some sports, the rare sport which might benefit for it because of as a combination of circumstances, as we discussed, overall, I think it's just because there's less money in the market and sport is not regarded as an essential, there will be many more leagues will go down, rights fees will actually go down.
Okay. All right. I've got one question for CD, and then I've got one question for both of you to kind of wrap this up. So I just wanted to find out what CD's view on online gaming is, like Ludo, poker, and the rest of it, right? Do you see that as something which is like a big growing trend, or do you see that as not sport, or what do you see that as? Again.
See, again, it is more about participative sport. So it kind of blurs the spectator sport versus participative sport, right? On a mass scale, the closest we have is something like marathon, which is a little bit more of a participative sport. So so I think maybe there is a business opportunity of participative sport where people take place in online competitions, and maybe there's a business model that can be created out of that. And if some of these need exceptional skills which are visible to spectators, you can also, for example, we know some of the esports in places like South Korea and all get huge stadium or attendances and stuff like that. As I said, maybe there is a opportunity for some kind of a disruption which keeps in mind all the current constraints and actually reinvents a new kind of sport, which can be a combination of participative and spectator. But there could be another channel of participative sports where people need entertainment. People need to feel, at the end of a hard day, need to get their break and whatever. One was watching other people play. Today, maybe some of them will choose to play themselves. And if somebody can make a business model out of that, so be it. And I agree with Joy that, in the short run, and it's true of all businesses, almost all businesses, right? The whole pie is going to shrink. So a lot of people are going to fall off. The big guys may still survive. And the middle guys and the relatively small guys might fall off. But I also see the opportunity of a lot of innovation and innovative, invention at the fringes, which may become the future, successes happening because of, necessity is the mother of invention.
Yeah. Okay. Wow, you guys, you have no idea how much of a struggle I am having with all these questions that I'm getting right. Oh God, I don't know where to stop. There are some questions which are saying, what are the panel's thoughts on TikTok as a platform for aspiring sports persons to showcase their talent? Let's not get into that. Thank you, Shikhar, for that question. Vibhor, you've given a question on PUBG, and that's also good. Siddharth Raman, shout out to you. Thank you for that question. For Joy on packaging esports. There are so many questions by Saurabh, Noor, Ananda. So the list is endless, guys. You guys are very, very popular. I'm just the moron who's in here for the ride, but I'm enjoying myself. So I'm going to ask one moronic question to end this conversation that we've got. And so here we go, right? If you were managing marketing and management of the Olympics, right, which is going to happen either next year or the year after that, what would you do? What would your action plan be like? What would you actually, because there are so many factors that come into play, the marketing of it, the management of it, what would you do? It's a big one.
Okay, two parts. One is that one assumes that the Olympics are happening in July 2021. So one is that...
Yes, absolutely.
So one assumes that if that is, say, decided, it is actually an opportunity to make it much, much more special.
Yeah.
This is the Olympics to celebrate our fight, our resurrection from COVID. You can make it really special. You can make it... And if you've noticed, it has always happened that, when great situation, people have been faced with a huge amount of trouble with this. When you come back after that, the feeling that you have, the emotion is heightened, everything is heightened. So in many ways, this could be the most memorable Olympics ever, just because how much more we now value what we didn't have when COVID was here. So it's a huge emotional, big opportunity. I would play it very close to the heart. I would just play it about being back in sport, just celebrating sport. Keep it simple, keep it beautifully simple. That's what I do.
Okay. Well, thanks. What about you, CD?
I couldn't agree more with Joy. This could be the most special Olympics, not just because it's going to happen in an odd year, because it's truly about the Olympic spirit, right? Vini Vidi Vici. It's really about the coming back of humanity from the edge and celebrating all that is there in the human spirit to to fight. What I talked about, resilience and agility. It's really and Olympics is really all about that, right? So there's no better platform, there's no better brand than Olympics to celebrate the world coming back and celebrating, true the meaning and the true purpose of sports in human lives.
So it is going to be one heck of a special Olympics then. Well,
yeah, I mean that's how it should be marketed and seen. Yeah,
that you would just keep it simple and you would let it market itself is what I'm hearing actually.
No, we would build a lot of stories around it. We would probably get, the oldest Olympian alive to come and be there to saying that, I can't miss it. Yeah. I've been to 5 Olympics, but this one I have to be part of even as a spectator, because not in the history of Olympics has something as special like this happened. So make it really special. I think that's what Joy was saying. I'm building on what Joy said. I agree with him.
Wonderful. Wow, I don't know how the hell time has flown, especially for me. It's 6 o'clock. And thank you so much for this wonderful interaction, guys. Joy, it's been a pleasure to interact with you and to learn from you. And I wish I had sat in one of your lectures when you were there at MICA. And it's been fun.
Thanks,
so maybe
thanks.
When social distancing ends, I'll meet up with you and say hi. And CD, pleasure as usual, right? Thank you so much, and do forgive me for anything that I said.
You were fantastic.
Not at all. This was great fun, and you did a wonderful job, Siddharth. Thanks. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Cheers.
Bye.
Okay.
Thank you. Bye.
See you. Bye. Yeah.